Now, Israeli soldiers are still on the ground in Jenin in the occupied West Bank. The raid started on Tuesday night, and soldiers have been exchanging fire with Palestinian fighters in the refugee camp. Several Palestinians have been arrested. Residents say soldiers are patrolling the area, and drone strikes have also been reported. Earlier, Israeli forces stormed Jenin with armored tanks and bulldozers. They've also blocked the entrances of several hospitals, preventing the wounded from being treated.
And for the very latest on the war in Gaza, let's cross live to Israel city of Tel Aviv and speak with Rise special correspondent Karl Bostic. Karl, it's good to have you with us as always. What are the issues that could make another extension possible? And are we now looking at a longer-term ceasefire at this rate?
Good afternoon. Well, as you mentioned, Israel, they have now received another list of Israeli hostages to be released today, another list of 10 people. This would be the end of the 2-day extension that ends by tomorrow morning at 7. Already, there are still 155 hostages still in captivity in Gaza, at least. 9 children are still in captivity, at least 20 to 30 women. So today's list will perhaps include more women and children. Up until now, the priority has been releasing and getting the freedom of women and children. But now it's going to get much, much more difficult. Hamas has signaled a readiness to extend a truce or ceasefire for 4 more days. That would be, the 10-day limit that Israel had set arbitrarily. But for those next 4 days, for Hamas to be signaling, they're saying that they're able to deliver more hostages. But now we're looking at different categories of hostages beyond just, the women and children. For example, there's still amongst the children, there's still the youngest hostage, a 10-month-old baby, Kafir Bibas, and his 4-year-old brother, who's still in captivity, and apparently they're not on the list to be released today even. That's causing a lot of anger amongst a lot of people. But the other categories range from elderly people, the men captives, female soldiers, the reservists, and then finally regular soldiers. But the problem is the stakes will be much, much higher, with Hamas saying that they want to do a comprehensive, quote, mega deal. That's why the CIA Director William Burns, the head of Israel's Mossad spy agency, and even the Egyptian intelligence chief is all in Qatar, talking about a possible mega deal that would lead to a long-term truce. But that mega deal would be swapping the remaining prisoners, especially the soldiers, for all Palestinian prisoners. You're talking anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 prisoners altogether. That's something that Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has refused to entertain, or at least to say that there will be no deal beyond the 10th day, that they would resume the war. The war will continue. So after today, it remains to be seen just what kinds of hostages will be released and whether the truce can become more of a permanent truce.
Well said, Karl. But how much public pressure is there to bring all hostages home, no matter the cost? And could you throw more light on anything, that you might have in terms of updates about the conditions the hostages were kept under?
Right now, the country is really on an emotional knife edge, because now, after 4 days of releases, they're now seeing images, they're hearing stories about what's going on. There's a lot of anger and anxiety amongst the families of the remaining hostages and supporters of the hostages. Today, there was a clash outside Israel's parliament called the Knesset in Jerusalem, where protesters clashed with the police, and police tore down signs. In other words, they were allowing for protests in support of the hostages, but now it was taking a political turn because protesters were angry at Prime Minister Netanyahu's handling of this overall, beginning from the colossal intelligence failure. Protesters calling for Prime Minister Netanyahu's impeachment even. Those kinds of signs were being torn down. But now, in terms of what we're hearing as terms of conditions, you showed that doctor in his accounts. Now it's coming out that nearly all of the hostages, they have vitamin deficiencies from spending so much time underground for 50 plus days, no sunlight. They also have lung problems because they were in tunnels, which were damp and humid, and they have respiratory problems that could lead to an increased risk of pneumonia. A harrowing story of a 12-year-old boy who was forced to watch video footage of the atrocities of October 7th. He was forced to watch them repeatedly, reportedly even held at gunpoint to watch them. At the same time, he was kept in a room for 16 days by himself. What's really chilling and disturbing, when the 9-year-old girl was released and spoke with her father, he asked how she was. She couldn't talk to him. For quite some time, she only talked in whispers because the children had been conditioned to speak in whispers only. And that's what the children were doing on their release. Until they really knew that they were free, they were disoriented. One child had been told that they had been there for months. Because she was underground, she thought she had been in captivity for up to a year. And then when it came to going to the toilet, they would have to knock on the door and then wait for hours before being let out to go to the restroom.
Those are harrowing experiences, no doubt. Now, if the fighting does resume at the end of the ceasefire, how will that affect humanitarian aid? Briefly, please.
Well, you talked about the softening of the tone from the White House, and already the White House has made it clear if the war does resume, if the war does go on, there must be no more displacement of people. That's a very tall order because already about 1 million people have been displaced in southern Gaza. The Gaza Strip is about a quarter of the size of Abuja. And now you've got about 2 million people in just the bottom half. And the White House is simply saying no more can be displaced. And at the same time, if you resume the war, you must not interrupt the flow of fuel and water to hospitals, UN schools, or civilian infrastructures. That's a pretty tall order. But if this is what the U.S. is insisting, while it is Israel's war to prosecute, they cannot ignore the wishes and demands of the U.S.
Thank you so much, Arise Special Correspondent Karl Bostic, live from Tel Aviv. We appreciate your insight here on Newsday.